Well, actually, it's Jason Chaffetz, most approachable guy. I bet you can't find him. He's in hiding. He's on a little vacation, and I'm thrilled to fill in his seat. Did yesterday, and I'm here today. So thank you so much for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show. We got a lot to cover, a lot of ground out there. And, we got to start with the biggest story in the country, and it's all that flooding. When you look at the flooding and the serious, I mean, some stations are now reporting there's still more than 170 people missing after the flooding. This after more than 100 are confirmed dead. And it just keeps going. You also have flooding in other parts of the country. In New Mexico, 3 are dead after some serious rise in rivers there, and these horrific pictures of homes just being washed away. I want to give a shout out to, we got 2 affiliates there, KINN and KENN, both there in New Mexico. I'm sure covering this and concerned about their listeners there in New Mexico. New Mexico's a pretty decent sized state, but nevertheless, it's happening in other states as well. But certainly the Texas tragedy, it's one of the biggest losses of life in our country's history. And here to kind of give us some perspective, somebody who's always, like when there's bad things happening, interesting things happening, crazy things happening, fun things happening, Griff Jenkins from Fox, you see him there. I've seen you all over the world, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show.
Hey, Jason, it is awesome to be with you, and you are doing a fantastic job filling in for Brian on vacation. But, you're raising such an important point, and that is the story of this Texas flooding really hit home for me when we heard yesterday Texas Governor Greg Abbott saying that there have been more people killed in this area, in Kerrville County and in the surrounding counties, than in Hurricane Harvey, the historic hurricane that hit Houston in the flooding there. I was in the middle of that literally for a week or more. And, all of a sudden, obviously we have seen the death toll rising. We now know 170 still missing. You really begin to grasp the magnitude of this tragedy and the stories. I've been filling in some for Brian on Fox and Friends in the morning, and the stories coming are just heartbreaking. And now, as you mentioned too, we had video from out in Ruidoso, New Mexico, of an entire house floating down a river. They had water that rose some 20 feet in a very short period of time. And, it's a reminder that Mother Nature is a force that cannot be reckoned with sometimes.
Well, and Griff, I've seen you doing some really funny stuff on Fox and Friends or Fox. I mean, you name it, you've probably done it. I've seen you in war zones, but I'm touched. I remember there was one time I was on Outnumbered, and I hadn't done it very much. They're the Fox show that comes on at noon Eastern. And but we went live because there was all this, there was a hurricane aftermath, and you were standing kind of knee deep in water, and the woman was just saying, I lost everything. And I got so emotional just watching it.
Yeah.
And yet you stood there with composure. When you're interviewing and talking to people who've literally just had their lives washed away, or just devastated with a tornado or something like that, talk to me about people who have suddenly found themselves on that side of the equation, and what it's like. Like, how do you stand there with that composure and do it? But it's just, what do you ask somebody? What is it a comfort that they're interviewing and that they get to talk about it?
No. And it's a great question, Jason. And I've been privileged to have been given the opportunity and honor to cover historic events, and in this case, many of them natural disasters. But, when you are meeting these people, you're, in what is a developing catastrophe for these individuals. And you realize you have to sort of steel yourself and put yourself in a professional mindset to realize this story, this individual's story, is such an important part of the entire fabric of the story of the storm or the natural disaster, or in some cases, the war zone or whatever has happened. And that these people, in the case of the interview you're talking about, and you're very kind to say, give me kudos for that, but it wasn't me. And what you ultimately want to do is just give those people an outlet to let the world know their story so that they can understand.
Right.
Now, sure, it certainly serves a little bit of a purpose to also put a spotlight on it so that the officials back in Washington are making sure they heed that there may be federal help needed, and certainly for the local communities. But, one of the stories that recently touched me was a few months back when I was covering Hurricane Helene that had really hit Western North Carolina so hard. And it was, one of the more rural areas, and hurricanes don't typically really ravage Western North Carolina, but the flooding in this case did. And there was, a weak initial response by the federal government. This is the previous administration. And you had people like Samaritan's Purse, a group called Savage Operations, that really just dropped what they were doing, banded together, and came to try and help these people. And in one case, there was a elderly woman that had no power and had, couldn't get access to her medicine and whatnot. And, we were able to help her and give our phones to her and let her contact her daughter so that her daughter could find some way. The road in and out had been knocked down. So one of the teams we were with took her out of there. And so in some cases, it can be not only important to allow these people to tell their stories, which are so important for the country to hear, but also life-saving situations to try and help with any resources we have.
Well, and that's the devastation. Like I said, not only is it still playing itself out in Texas, you hope for a miracle there and some sort of rescue, but 170 still missing. And look, they got all of Texas trying to get down there and help and sort through this and try to find people, and hopefully there's just some miscommunication and that number isn't so high. But you also have it playing out in New Mexico, and not as many cameras or people necessarily there in certain parts of New Mexico. It's one of our most beautiful states. I also wanted to mention KOBE up in Las Cruces. They too they've got an audience that cares, and even though you don't have all the cameras, there's still, that flood is crazy big. And we've had things happening in North Carolina as well. But I just hope that people can remember and not forget, and they can help out where they possibly can. And so anyway, it's you've covered it, and it's hard and it's heart-wrenching, but let's move on to something easier and a little softer, if you can, this morning. And let's go to immigration.
Yeah, that's a soft issue. Immigration.
That's a soft one.
I'll tell you, man. I'll let you finish what you were going to say, but, I will just say it again and again. And on Twitter last night, I've been vilified by the left, by people that are putting ICE agents and officers and Border Patrol in unprecedented levels of assault. Assaults on ICE up nearly 700%. But there was one chief, Border Patrol chief, Greg Bolvino of the El Centro sector out in California, had put a picture of tires, some makeshift spikes, had taken out some Border Patrol tires, and they arrested the individuals that did that, fortunately. But, it wasn't an assault, but it was certainly an attack of sorts. And I just put something out there saying, not opining, but just pointing out this must stop. And the rhetoric against these federal immigration officers carrying out federal immigration law has got to end, because we're headed to a very dangerous place in this country, regardless of what your politics are.
Well, let's listen to Tom Homan. He's obviously the Trump administration border czar, somebody with deep, decades of experience here. Cut 30.
We're going to do the job. We're going to do it in Portland, too. But for the mayor of New York City and Chicago, President Trump made it clear 2 weeks ago. We're going to double down and triple down on sanctuary cities. Why? Not because they're blue, because we know there are recent public safety threats to the streets every day. Like Florida, we agree with all the sheriffs in Florida. They're taking our detainers. They're not releasing illegal alien public safety threats. They're calling us. So we can spend less resources in Florida and send them to New York, to Chicago, and to Portland, and L.A. We're going to double down and triple down on sanctuary cities. If we can't arrest a bad guy in the jail, then we'll go to community and we'll find him. Or we'll do more worksite enforcement. We'll find him at the worksite. And when we do these things and we ramp up that enforcement, we're going to find others who aren't a criminal target, but they're in the country illegally. We're going to arrest them too.
Yeah, if anybody doubts the resolve of the Trump administration and Tom Homan and Kristi Noem and all that, they got another thing coming. But this idea that they're going to intimidate ICE, that they're going to dox ICE, that they're going to, now there's this thing about, how dare you wear masks? Well, it's because you're threatening to dox these people, and you want their facial recognition so that you can then go get their information and track down their families. That's why they're doing that.
Yeah, and it's important in all of this that people take a step back and realize these are real human beings. These are men and women who chose to answer the call to serve. In this case, federal immigration law enforcement, putting themselves in danger and at risk just by the job's description, now being targeted in an unprecedented way and assaulted. And you have to think about the human reality of it. These spouses of these agents and officers, the children, are terrified knowing that their mom or dad or brother or sister could come to great harm on any given day just trying to do their job. You look at just the number of incidences, whether it was the Border Patrol Annex facility in McAllen, Texas, where we just saw the individual come out with a assault rifle firing. He was killed by Border Patrol response, but yet this was a armed attack. And then you had, of course, in Alvarado, Texas, 10 individuals arrested, charged now with trying to kill, first-degree murder charges on a federal immigration officer. We're learning more about that incident. This was an ICE facility. An ICE officer was shot in the neck. Fortunately, he's going to be okay. But we're learning that these individuals were coordinating this. They had assault rifles. They were firing from different positions, advantage points, one from far away that hit the guy in the neck. But they were also wearing body armor. They had cell phones in a Faraday bag, which is used to design
ready to shoot
to try and hide their identities. And so it's certainly unacceptable that in the passion of some sort of protest that we've seen violence explode. But this is a whole different animal when you're talking about a premeditated, coordinated attack by an organized group.
Well, and look, these officers, I've just never understood conceptually the whole idea of a sanctuary city. You have somebody who's a criminal, here illegally, but then they've also committed a crime. And why they think they have a moral obligation, that it's the higher moral ground to hide this person and assist and harbor this person, that makes absolutely no sense to me. I've never understood the concept.
It makes no sense whatsoever, and there's a hypocrisy of it as well. Now, I will tell you, because I've reported a lot on the sanctuary city stuff, some will tell you that the original intent of a sanctuary city was a local effort in a community to try and make the immigrant population not intimidated by law enforcement. Why? Because they feared that when the people in the immigrant community had an emergency and needed to dial 911 for help, domestic abuse or other things, they wouldn't think twice about doing it because they were feared that they would, in their time of crisis, then be, deported and rounded up. And so that's the intent. Okay, I can get there. But look at what it's become. It's become this political, I would argue, losing political play on the clear top of the cards to play for the Democrat Party, doubling down in places like Boston, like Chicago, like Los Angeles, that are absolutely enforcing zero cooperation with federal law enforcement. And they are releasing onto the streets these individuals who have convictions for homicide, child sexual assault, domestic abuse, you name it. The list goes on and on. ICE, DHS, CBP, Border Patrol puts out daily pictures and stories and rap sheets of these individuals that are being released. And Homan is now having to go out, as he said in that soundbite, at large, make at large arrests because the local and state officials just release them to the streets. And the hypocrisy, last point, is do you know who's at greatest risk of violence from those criminals? The immigrant community itself.
Exactly.
That a sanctuary law was always intended to protect.
Exactly. Well, look, I know Griff Jenkins, if it involves a bulletproof vest or waders or a bathing suit, you're going to be there. Griff
Sign
Jenkins, thank you so much for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show. We have Dr. Nicole Saphier. She's joining us. Dr. Saphier, thanks for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show.
Hey, Jason. Happy to be on with you.
Now, you broke some rules, Nicole.
Uh-oh. Yeah, that sounds like me, though.
Yeah, you broke some rules. Let's explain to the listeners what the rule is as it relates to stairs and socks.
Oh, yeah. Well, Jason, about December 2020, in the thick of COVID, I was walking with socks on my staircase, and I didn't have runners. So top to bottom, I fell down 13 stairs. The good news is I didn't hit my head. I didn't hit my neck, but I sacrificed my arm to protect my head and neck. So I am homebound right now. I just had my third surgery to put my arm back together after that fall.
I am so sorry. But what's the rule in the Saphier household? What's the rule?
No socks on stairs.
And you wore socks on stairs.
Yeah.
I know. And then you took this horrific fall. I'm so sorry. 3 surgeries. But I know you'll be out there throwing those fastballs sooner rather than later. You're not exactly the best patient. I can tell by watching your Instagram. You had surgery, and next thing I know, you're outside doing things.
Well, I mean, I did have surgery last week, and I will say I am an okay patient, but doctors do make the worst patients. But, FIFA 2025, I had to take my kids to go watch Real Madrid. So, sling, bandages, and all, off we went.
There you go. Listen, you've been on top of this. You've written books about healthcare and COVID and all of these things. But let's talk about real time here, because I was serious when I was doing this introduction. I feel like my federal government lied to me. That food pyramid, I mean, what was I? And I'm getting the number wrong, but I was supposed to have like 11 bowls of grains and cereals every day. I would go to bed until recently. I would have 2 bowls of cereal before I went to bed, thinking I was doing my body good because I was eating life. How can it be worse? I was eating life. You're telling me I did the wrong thing? Now they're telling me, oh, you had carbs, you had sugar. I'm like, but I was eating cereal called life.
Well, so first of all, the food pyramid, that was developed several decades ago, we have evolved in our research when it comes to what is really good for you. But the reality is we had the knowledge. I wrote Make America Healthy Again, May 2020. It's essentially talking about where are people the healthiest, why are they the healthiest, and what the heck did our government do to kind of make it all wrong. And the reality is, if you look at the blue zones all across the world, that's where people live the longest and the healthiest. It's all about the Mediterranean diet. Now, part of the Mediterranean diet, a lot of seafood, a lot of fruits and vegetables also has to do with walking and socialization. But there are still grains in it. And the reality is, if you travel anywhere outside of the United States and you have grains, you have breads or pastas or whatever it is, they're entirely different than what we are consuming here in the United States. And that's because here in the United States, everything is all about instant gratification. How can we make it as cheap and efficient as possible? So we have all of these ultra-processed, ultra-refined starches in our grains. So not all grains are created equal in the world. And unfortunately, here in the United States, we tend to have the unhealthiest version of them.
Yeah, I mean, I go all over Asia. I've been to Asia multiple times. I go to Japan. I can't find a fat person to save my life. Like, they got these...
And they eat a lot of rice, by the way.
They are eating rice with everything. But they're walking. They're always exercising, and they are, eating a lot of seafood. I'm not just trying. I mean, it literally is like that. I actually read this book about this. I can't even remember what it was called, but it was about the community that had the most 100-plus-year-olds, and their common denominator was they lived in hilly areas. That they constantly were doing stills, not just stairs. They were not just walking, but they were walking uphill, which was another key factor. It was just one of the takeaways in this these book. But let's go back to what we're doing here in the United States, because I was a little skeptical of RFK Jr., but I love what he's doing and the way he's doing it. And now, talking about food dyes, you got some that embraced it and said, hey, yeah, we're going to work to transition out of this. But, there's an article up on foxnews.com right now. Headline is Popular Candy Maker Pushes Back on RFK Jr.'s MAHA initiative to ban synthetic food dyes. What's the right answer on this?
Yeah, so first of all, when it comes to RFK Jr. in his role as the Secretary of HHS, there are some things that I'm not loving, but there are also some things that I really do think heading in the right direction for our country, and one of it is our food supply. Now, what you're referring to right now is the HHS and the FDA essentially have come out and said, we want to phase out these petroleum-based food dyes from our food and beverage industry. Good news. We should be doing this. You know why? Because elsewhere in the world, they've already done this. They didn't just do this yesterday. They did this years ago, if not decades ago. The United States, for whatever reason, continues to lag behind, and that is because we have huge lobbying and big company interests that influence our government. And so you already have some companies that have said voluntarily they're going to start phasing them out. That's great. We should have been phasing these out a while ago. There's no reason to have some of these chemicals in our foods. We don't allow them in our cosmetics. We certainly wouldn't want to give them to our children because based on a lot of animal and rodent studies, they show that these could potentially be cancer-causing, and we already know our cancer rates are high. So we have to start phasing out some of these unhealthy things that we're consuming. Now, a couple of candy companies have come forth and said, we're not necessarily going to voluntarily phase these out. Why? Because people, when they eat candy, they're not under the guise of they're eating something healthy. People don't consume candy the same way that they do like cereal. There are some children who are eating cereal with these synthetic food dyes every single day. Now, that is so unhealthy. That is why we have an obesity problem in our kids. So, yes, I understand it's more important for the cereal companies, which have like these healthy labels on them, even though they're not healthy. They need to get that out. And so the candy companies, do we really need to do this? People know that candy is not healthy. And by the way, they don't consume it every single day. But here's the question I have for you, Jason. The same candy, if you go get it in France or somewhere in Europe, the colors aren't as vibrant. You know why? Because they've already removed it from there because the government has said it can't be allowed in it. So why not just have a one-size-fits-all? If one government says it's probably unhealthy, why can't we just take it out? Please, I don't need lime green candy. It can be a muted green. I'd be fine with that.
You mean, are you trying to tell me that my Diggum smacks were not healthy? Because I really bought into that frog. I thought that was bringing me the the nutrition and protein that I was looking for. You are right. Because, I think the example, I hope I get it right, was Fruit Loops. We got a very bright, it's fruit and in loops. How could be wrong with that? And they were so vibrant in their colors. But I'm eating fruit because they're Fruit Loops. But they're not, they use these words and how they market it, and you're right, the color to make it that much more enticing. But I probably kidding myself if I thought Captain Crunch but how about King Vitamin? I grew up in the era of King Vitamin. I was getting 12 essential vitamins.
The Flintstone vitamins that are brightly colored? Come on.
Yes.
Full of sugar and chemicals. Maybe they're getting a little vitamin C.
They didn't taste good.
But you know what? Just go give your kid an orange.
Well, but Nicole, I probably ate 12 years of Flintstone vitamins with my breakfast. And the orange one, it kind of tasted a little bit like orange, but did it need to be, it wasn't the same as eating an orange. I agree, but I'm just telling you, this is how I grew up, how I survived knowing what we know now. It's just unbelievable to me.
Yeah, but
because these were the go-to things.
The reason that this is becoming an issue is because look at our rates of dementia, cancer, autism. We have so much disease plaguing Americans, more so than the rest of the world. We have to take a look at what we've been consuming. Just because it was okay a couple of decades ago, that may be what has ultimately led to where we are now. And it's going to take a while to pull back the damage that has been done, but we have to get back to the basics. We have way too much manufactured artificial products that we are consuming, whether it is from our lotions, our creams, the drinks, the water, the food. We are causing disease in our bodies, and it is not a one-size thing. You can't just point to one thing that's causing it. It's everything. The fact that our kids are having puberty way too early. Kids are getting a lot of hormonal issues, metabolic syndromes. They're growing super tall because they have been exposed to hormones and steroids in the meats we're consuming. There's so much, Jason, that's going on, and it is going to take decades, if not century, to kind of right the wrong that we have done by all of the consumption that we've been doing of these products. And now, by the way, I'm not someone who's saying go live off the land and you have to eat everything, from a pure garden and you can't go to the store anymore. I've never been that person. But at some point, we need to look at what we're doing. And, when I go to the store, I look at hormone-free meats because I don't want my kids eating something that has already been injected with hormones, that's going to disrupt their own hormone system. So you want to try and eat as healthy as possible. And unfortunately, the healthier the food, the more expensive it is, and people aren't able to afford it. And that's why it's crucial that the HHS under RFK Jr. get involved to make sure that everyone has access to healthier foods.
Well, I can tell you, I trust Dr. Marty McCary a heck of a lot more than anybody else has been in there. And RFK Jr., who is actually talking some sense now. But that's why I started by saying I feel like I've been lied to my whole life. I mean, that's what I thought the FDA was there to do, was to protect me, so I didn't have to decipher every label of everything and try to figure out what the balance is. How we do food labeling in this country got better, but still, so much of it is hidden. And they can get away with some generalities without the specificity that they should be doing in terms of labeling, and not just food, but also chemicals, household cleaners, those types of things. You should really know what these things are so we can make an informed decision.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, they're brightly colored. They are cheap, and it's what most people gravitate to when they go to the grocery store. And so the one thing I say, when you're in the grocery store, you on the periphery, because that's where you're going to find the natural fruits and veggies and the things that are healthier for you. It's when you get to the center of the grocery stores, in those aisles, that's when you start finding the heavily processed and unhealthy stuff.
Well, if you're talking about my Doritos or my Cheetos, you've gone a step too far. I could just tell you, there will always be room for Fritos in my life.
Everything
my dad used
in moderation, Jason. Everything in moderation.
I grew up with a dad who would take a bag of Fritos and a pint or a quart of ice cream. He would scoop the ice cream with his Fritos while he watched, football on Sunday. Yes. And he was not a large man. I don't know how the Chaffetz family was relatively slim and trim for the type of diet that we were eating. I can tell you, I don't know how we got from here to there, but we are fortunate.
Well, I may raise my own chickens and have a massive vegetable garden, but there will always be Oreos in my pantry. And that is just the truth. And I'm okay with that. You can't
eat an Oreo. You can't you can't eat an Oreo and then deny that you've eaten it, because it will manifest itself between your teeth. Like, if you smile, you know that it has happened. But I don't know. Sometimes I just break it apart and eat just the white part. We've all done that. Let's be honest. Just scoop out the white part, throw away the black part.
3 of them.
I try to eat the cookie dough before it actually gets cooked. That's my go-to. Dr. Nicole Saphier, always enjoy it. We wish you nothing but the best on the fixing of that arm. We need you back on the pitcher's mound here throwing fastballs. So good luck with that. But thanks so much for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show.
I appreciate it, Jason. Have a great day.
Oh, real quickly, your books. Tell us about your books and how to find you real quick.
Well, Make America Healthy Again, Panic Attack, and Love Mom are my 3 best-selling books. They're all available on Amazon. It's Amazon Prime Day right now, so you might want to check them out. You can also find me on Instagram and X, as I tend to be active, especially when I'm bored, like I am right now.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Not right
thanks,
this minute, just now not being in the hospital because of my broken wing.
It is amazing that you wrote a book called Make America Healthy Again. I wonder where they got that from.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Before it became a thing. Dr. Nicole Saphier, thanks so much for joining us. I'm joined in studio with Leah Siskind. I hope I pronounced your name properly, unless I was in the ballpark. She's the Foundation for Defense of Democracies Artificial Intelligence Research Fellow. And I really wanted her to come in because we're seeing some stories now. And look, I wrote a book. It's called They're Coming for You. And it's talking about how technology data is going to be leveraged against people, and where we're going, and the technology that's already here today is being used for nefarious purposes. And one of those is playing out in real time right now. We're seeing this story of Marco Rubio, right? Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. He's got like 4 hats. He's National Security Advisor. He's running the archives. He's just like doing everything. So, Marco Rubio, there's evidently somebody out there using artificial intelligence and contacting other government officials saying, hey, this is Marco, and having conversations with them. This is scary stuff, Leah.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Where are we going in this world?
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. Technology is here, and it definitely can be manipulated and used in very dangerous ways. What we're seeing right now is really the new frontier of influence operations. So what we learned yesterday, an internal State Department cable announced that there had been deepfake voice recordings and text messages sent by an imposter pretending to be Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Yeah. They were sent to multiple heads of state, a governor, and a member of Congress. At this point, we don't know much else. We don't know who those heads of state were, but you can imagine, you can easily wrap your head around the gravity of this situation, how serious it is, and how effective this technology is at manipulating diplomacy.
Yeah, look, I was with Marco Rubio yesterday. I physically, I didn't poke him like in the shoulder to say, hey, Marco, is that really you? But, he's got a very distinctive voice. If you're ever on the phone with him, which I have, then you know exactly that it's Marco. But if it's a deep fake, now this also affects real people. Not that Marco's a fake person, but not many people get to interact with him unless you're another Secretary of State or a head of state or, like a member of Congress. But, if you live in Louisiana or you live in, in Colorado, or I mean, this is going to start happening in mass. How do we deal with it?
Absolutely. And one of the things that worries me is that finding deepfakes of very high level senior officials, those are almost easier to out because we can we can verify and validate soon enough that whether they came from that person. But what I'm more concerned about is, what about lower level officials? What about undersecretaries of state that don't have that same profile, or that same level of recognition? How long?
Well, what about that teenager? I mean, President Trump in the joint session of Congress highlighted this teenager. This poor young lady had a deep fake, a nude photo of somebody, and they put her head on it, and then they were passing it around, and she was terribly embarrassed. And how do you put that genie back in the bottle? And then imagine the bullying and the other devastation for a fragile young person who wakes up one day and 100, 300 people at the high school think they've seen a nude picture of you.
No, deepfakes it's a whole new level of abuse and manipulation, and I'm glad that the administration is taking it so seriously. But to your point about how do we start to understand how these are being created and how they're proliferating, deepfake videos have been around. We have seen them. They are very complex to do well. It's pretty easy to see kind of a scrappily done
Instagram
video.
Something with a cat down jumping around doing a dance.
Or but even
that cat on the diving board, I got to tell you, I think that was actually real.
that was pretty amazing. I have to admit, I watched that myself.
Yes.
But deepfake audio is so much easier. This is the true low-hanging fruit here, because video requires so many inputs. It requires a pretty sophisticated understanding of and use of technology. Deepfake audio can be done extremely well with about 30 seconds of recorded audio of a person.
Really?
You can use AI tools to model our audio recording, and from that you can start to map tone, inflection, emotion, pitch, accent, speech patterns. All you need is 30 seconds of audio.
Wow.
And there are tools that are online, they're free, they're pretty user-friendly that just about anyone could use to put together a deepfake audio recording.
Okay, so how do you defend against it? What is there a role in Congress that should be done? But Congress is notoriously slow. So you're the average person, or you think that somebody might be impersonating you. Do you have to come up with safe words or code words, if you will, to say that, look, you'll know it's me if I use this word, and then you let your family know? I mean, what do you do? This
is like any other area of cyber defense. We have to have protocols and we have to have a playbook. So first of all, I know that the administration seems very comfortable using consumer grade communication apps like Signal. I use Signal. I love Signal. I understand. Right. But the problem is they are encrypted. That means they protect the comms, but they're not verifying the identity of the person using them. So people need to know what they're doing when they use them, that they're not truly safe. So if you're going to be sending sensitive information, they need to use kind of formal channels of communication. Also, our ability to detect these fakes, especially with audio, when we don't have as many points of information to kind of suss out whether it's real or not, a lot is going to have to be based on the context. So if you get a message like the one sent from Secretary Rubio, which, by the way, were created just spoofing an account. They just created marco.rubio@state.gov on Signal. Anyone could create a fake account like that. I think you need to focus on the context. If you are getting a sudden ask for quick action, taking a minute to say, this seems maybe out of character, or this is maybe unlike this person, I'm going to take a moment to confirm by saying, this sounds important. Why don't we switch to a high side communication?
Or why don't I call you back, right?
Yeah.
There was one time where I went to one of our national labs, and the national laboratories do some really sensitive, highly classified information. And I remember asking him, and I said, how do we deal with this? We were talking about piracy, like how do we, the movie industry and the music industry suffers from this all the time, pirated copies. So I said, well, what do we do about it? And they said, analog is the way to do it. But how do we do that in today's society?
Yeah, it's hard because you have to weigh convenience and the ability to work quickly with security. That's always going to be the rub. But another important thing to focus on is whoever this imposter was knew the acronyms, knew the lingo. They were able to really accurately represent a State Department official. And one area of major vulnerability for all government agencies is just good old-fashioned phishing attacks, where people are trying to manipulate you and get you to click on a link and get exposed to malware, and then use that to glean information about your agency. So just reinforcing basic trainings of how to detect phishing attacks and how to prevent them in your agency is an important step one.
PHISHING. Phishing. It's if you don't know what it is, you also worry about, grandma, right? The hypothetical but real grandma who's out there. This technology is moving so fast. It's so new. They're just figuring out how to use FaceTime. And next thing you know, they're going to get a message that sounds exactly like Junior.
It's true.
And they're going to say, hey, your son's been kidnapped, or he's in a car accident, or he's, you need to. And you're right. There is the common sense that says, hey, if you're getting something that's dramatic, but we had some really demented people who contacted in somebody's voice saying, Mom, or whatever it was, I desperately need this. Or this person's been killed. In one case, I remember reading a story about, imagine the devastation and the change in your heartbeat that's going on, but it was fake.
I know.
It wasn't real.
I know real world examples of all the things you're talking about, of grandmas being preyed upon and asked to quickly transfer money. This isn't a matter of ignorance or internet savvy. Anyone can fall prey to this.
Is it using apps like Authy and those types of things with a dual authenticator? Where is this going? Because it just seems like the nefarious are 2 steps ahead of where others want to go. And, again, in my book, they're coming for you. My worry is that the government is buying and selling this data in mass. Data brokers are able to garner so much information about you. Most people are just oblivious to it. I think they look at it. The premise of this they're coming for you book is, people want to trade convenience. Or they trade some personal information for convenience, but they have no idea in mass how it's spreading and being used to push people out of the economy, debanking, social credit scores, just used in the voting schemes. There's all kinds of these things going on that I think most people are oblivious to. So, but the bigger question, I think, is somebody's going to get mega rich by figuring out how to create something that's verifiable. You're right. Signal's a really good example. I'm glad you brought that up because, it's encrypted, but how do you verify?
That's exactly who you're talking to.
Yeah.
You're hitting on so many good points.
Especially if you can do artificial intelligence with their face.
Exactly. And all the points that you made about big data and learning, consumer behavior, building up profiles of people and their interests and their likes, and AI just is an absolute force multiplier for kind of every nefarious use of that data before. Now we can kind of do that on steroids. So it just becomes a lot easier. And you also mentioned all the different ways that we're seeing deepfakes, and whether it's preying on people or trying just for financial gain or for access to information. We absolutely see it in the political realm as well. Like leading up to the 2024 election, there were robocalls, fake audio recordings of then President Biden that were disseminated, encouraging people not to vote in the New Hampshire primary.
Yeah.
So we can do our best to debunk these things quickly, but you have to wonder, how long are they going to go? Now, that's something extremely high profile. That is going to be detected and debunked pretty fast. But with the situation with the State Department, what's so concerning to me is how long did these messages go undetected? How much damage
yeah.
Could they have? And we know that diplomacy is entirely based on trust and communication. So the wrong word, a word used incorrectly, could potentially derail negotiations that are months in the making, or destabilize a fragile relationship, or worse, even set up some sort of diplomatic crisis.
Or if somebody responds and provides classified or highly sensitive materials, that who knows where it can go to. Look, I could talk to you all day about this. It's obviously of keen interest. Leah Siskind, right? Did I pronounce it right?
You did indeed. Yes, thank you so much.
Foundation for Defense of Democracies. You do great work. You got your mind wrapped around. You are going to be perpetually employed, because if you're looking into this stuff and understanding it, you're going to be a very valuable employee. So whatever you do in whatever. So thanks so much for joining us on the Brian Kilmeade Show.